So, I'm sure that now we're all too familiar with the vaccine debate. Over 200 years ago, the very first vaccine, the smallpox vaccine, was introduced by Edward Jenner in 1796. This amazing medical achievement saved the lives of many, but 222 years later, we're debating if they're all that safe. Why is that? It all stems from a 1998 case series study published in The Lancet. The paper claimed to have found evidence of the causal relationship between autism and the MMR vaccination. Reaction to the paper was immediate, and press outlets began to cover the groundbreaking findings, which naturally terrified parents. Over the next 12 years, these findings were studied exhaustively, but hundreds of different studies found no link between vaccinations and autism. Eventually, Lancet retracted the study in 2010, and 3 months later, Wakefield was banned from practicing medicine in Britain. But the seed of doubt was planted as soon as the paper was released, and, by then, had grown into an orchard of conspiracy. Today, many people still believe that vaccines are dangerous despite overwhelming evidence. Anti-Vaxxers, as they're now called, can be seen in shockingly large numbers on Facebook and other social media websites. In fact, our president, Donald Trump, has tweeted numerous times about the link between autism and vaccinations. The conspiracy still lives on, but Texas seems to have a different perspective on the debate. To them, it's about liberty and the choice rather than actual scientific facts. So, let's hear some hot takes on vaccinations from my fellow Sociology 105 groupmates as they react to Vice's documentary, Liberty Over Safety is the Texas Anti-Vaxxer Way.
Baseless claims about a link between vaccines and developmental disorders have fueled the so-called anti-vaxxer movement for years now. But in Texas, the anti-vaxxers are motivated by something else: an unconditional commitment to personal freedom, even at the expense of public health.
31-year-old Republican State Representative Briscoe Cain is a member of the state's Freedom Caucus.
Why is the debate about vaccines so strong in Texas? Is this something specific to Texas?
It's kind of something in our history, in our DNA, that we desire to be free from government intervention in our lives.
From your perspective, what's the vaccine choice debate about?
The parent should have the ability to decide whether or not their child takes medicine or receives an injection.
I agree with State Representative Briscoe Cain because people are given the right and freedom to decide things for themselves. One of these things is whether or not to receive vaccines or not. Therefore, Cain deserves to decide whether or not he wants to get a vaccine and whether or not his kids should receive vaccines. No one should be ruled over by the government.
It's about liberty.
So it's not about vaccines themselves or their safety?
For some it is. For me personally, it has nothing to do with the science or debating the science of vaccines.
I think that it has to do with both debating the science of vaccines as well as liberty. I believe that the level to which people rule you should be stopped here because vaccines are a personal matter and people need to decide for themselves.
Do you get vaccines yourself?
I do.
Do you have children?
I do. And they've been vaccinated.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up getting the flu shot every year.
I can relate because I grew up getting the flu shot every year, but I do go by the judgment of myself.
When Briscoe talks about fighting for parental rights, it's people like Stacey Methin that he has in mind.
This is an exemption form. This is for me and my son.
She's previously filed exemptions for her 11-year-old son, Christian, the youngest of her 5 children. Christian hasn't received any vaccines since he was 6.
Could you walk?
Stacey is not the only parent filing for immunization exemptions. According to the Houston Chronicle, the number of statewide exemptions in Texas has spiked from less than 3,000 in 2003 to about 50,000 in 2018. Given the state's estimated 5.5 million school children, this is about a 20-fold increase in just 15 years.
Me through some of the documents that are in here.
This one is one of the first ones that I actually went and researched. And it talks about the role of the federal government. But it doesn't give them the right to mandate vaccines. We have a right on this planet to choose for our own bodies what we take in. And it should be the same way with a shot or treatment.
For many Texas residents, the debate over vaccines is much more about agency than about the vaccines themselves and their medical effects. Stacy, like many other parents, values liberty and the right to act independently more than safety.
In Texas, non-medical or conscientious exemptions from vaccines can be granted for any personal reason, including religion.
That's what I meant.
Stacy is studying to be a nurse. She claims that 2 of her grandchildren were injured after getting vaccinated.
My attitude with life as well as vaccines is that if you believe in it, you push for it. It's hard for me. Yeah. It's hard for me to think of a future where other children would lose their rights and continue to be injured when none of us knows why.
Do you think that's a possibility? Do
I
you
do,
worry
I
about
do.
your rights being taken away?
I worry about the rights of my children and all of the other children out there.
Those children who cannot receive vaccines due to allergies or age limits are placed at risk by those children who can be vaccinated but whose parents choose not to do so. This has been proven by studies which show that if only some of the population is vaccinated, 1 or 2 cases of a disease can result in an outbreak. However, if most of the population is vaccinated, these 1 or 2 cases are less likely to result in widespread disease and injury. In 2000, the CDC declared measles eradicated. However, in 2014, one of the largest outbreaks since then was observed with 667 cases documented over 27 states. This information makes a strong backing for the argument that not vaccinating eligible children is a public health issue, especially in the case of families of lower socioeconomic status that may lack the resources to afford these vaccines for their children through insurance or other financial means.
Okay.
Heather and David Pencil are worried too, but for a different reason. They live in the Austin suburbs, where public school districts have some of the highest exemption rates in the state. And private school exemption rates run as high as 40%.
The fact that you live in Austin instead of New York City, for instance, puts your family more at risk.
Yeah.
What happens if there's a measles outbreak here?
Bar the doors!
Right, yeah. So, say baby is younger than 6 months. I would genuinely be concerned because measles is a serious disease. I mean, it can cause encephalitis, it can cause deafness, lots of things.
A bill introduced this year would have made exemption rates for individual schools publicly available. But in May, that bill stalled out in the state legislature after the Freedom Caucus opposed it for infringing on personal privacy.
How does it make you feel that the debate right now is people putting their privacy above other people's health safety?
It's a privilege issue. They are more concerned about their children than the risk of the greater population. And it's a false risk. Because that information is already available at that level.
It's already being collected.
Yeah, I mean,
you just wish that you could just...
Yeah, it should be available to parents. It's a public health issue.
Along with personal liberties, Stacy also touches on the possibility of children being injured by vaccines. Although this is a common argument among anti-vaxxers, it lacks credible scientific evidence. According to Volume 42 of the Wake Forest Law Review, medical evidence is still inconclusive regarding a causal link between vaccines and serious illnesses and disorders.